Hey there. Are you ready to unlock a world of brand new scary stories tonight? Before we dive into it, I want to know, where and when are you watching this? Drop your answers in the comments below and join our community. Make sure to subscribe and smash that like button so you never miss a spine-tingling moment. You can send me your scary stories to the email in the description box. Now, get comfy, turn off the lights, and now, let's begin. I was house and pet sitting for my next-door neighbor and friend, Angel, while she was enjoying a vacation in Hawaii. Angel, a gentle widow, had trusted me to care for her home and beloved animals. My responsibilities were simple: feed her 2 cats, play with them when needed, and tend to her elderly Yorkie by taking him for walks and keeping him company. In the beginning, everything seemed perfectly normal, and the quiet routine made the days pass uneventfully. Then, while she was still away, I received heartbreaking news from Angel over the phone. Her loyal dog, who had been a cherished companion in the home, had passed away unexpectedly. With a heavy heart, I followed her instructions. I called her back, explained what had happened, and, as she had requested, carefully arranged the dog's remains in the freezer until proper arrangements could be made. The task was difficult, filled with sadness and disbelief, yet I did my best to stay composed. That night, after all the day's events had settled into an eerie silence, I stepped out onto the back patio for a smoke. The cool night air and the quiet of the empty house provided a momentary escape from the emotional weight of the day. I smoked slowly, allowing my thoughts to wander as I tried to find solace in the dark hours. Around midnight, while I was gathering my things and turning out the lights to signal the end of the day, I suddenly heard something that made me stop in my tracks. At first, it was just a sound, a bark that should have been coming from a dog. But it wasn't. The sound carried a peculiar quality. It resembled a bark, yet there was something distinctly off about it. It was as if a man's voice were deliberately imitating a dog's bark, each note unnervingly precise. My heart began to race as I turned around to look for the source of the sound. I surveyed the area. My house was positioned to the left of Angel's, with a vacant house to the right, and another property with motion sensor lights behind hers. Despite the quiet of the night, I found no one in sight. Then the sound came again. Once, then twice, each instance echoing from somewhere just beyond the fence that separated our properties. It felt as if someone, or something, was deliberately playing with me, using the strange barking to unsettle me. The sound grew louder and more insistent, almost mocking in its repetition, as if its source were having far too much fun in scaring me. There was a chill in the air, and every instinct told me that something was not right. I strained my eyes in the darkness, trying to discern any movement or a shadow that might betray a presence lurking nearby, but the area remained empty and still. The sound itself, however, carried an almost human quality, a deliberate, almost mischievous mimicry that was impossible to ignore. That was all I needed to send me running. I bolted back towards my house, the strange barking seeming to follow me, growing even louder as I hurried along the darkened path. But the moment I reached the front yard, the sound abruptly stopped, plunging me into a silence that was as unsettling as the noise itself. I didn't stop running until I was safely inside my own home, slamming the door behind me. Later that night, my husband sat with me as I recounted every detail of what had happened. The peculiar sound, the feeling of being watched, and the eerie sensation that had compelled me to flee. He tried to comfort me, suggesting that perhaps it was just a prank by some mischievous soul. Though his words provided a small measure of relief, I couldn't shake the lingering unease that clung to me like a shadow. A few days afterward, while sharing a quiet moment and a smoke with my mother-in-law, I found myself mentioning that unnerving night. I described the entire sequence of events, emphasizing the bizarre quality of the sound and the feeling that something was off. Without much hesitation, she simply nodded and said, "Oh, that's Rex." I was momentarily stunned. "Rex?" I asked, my voice trembling with disbelief. She went on to explain that Angel's late husband, Rex, was known for his quirky sense of humor. In his lifetime, he used to mimic a dog's bark from over the fence, a light-hearted prank he would play on Angel. According to her, this odd habit was something that had become part of Angel's everyday experience, a playful reminder of Rex that continued even after his passing. The explanation was as unexpected as it was surreal, although a part of me was comforted by the notion that it could be nothing more than a quirky echo of the past. The memory of that night's experience still sent shivers down my spine. The bizarre mimicry and the feeling of being taunted by an unseen presence were too vivid to simply dismiss. The following day, I called Angel and related everything. She confirmed with a gentle chuckle that Rex had indeed been known for his unusual antics, and that the sound I had heard was likely his spirit playfully lingering on the other side of the fence. Despite her reassurance, I found that I still couldn't bring myself to return to that area alone at night. The experience had left an indelible mark on me, a reminder that even in the most familiar settings, the echoes of the past can stir feelings of both fond remembrance and lingering unease. It was a warm August night in 2021 in Florida. My friend and I were driving home after a fun day at a famous theme park. The clock had just passed 11 p.m. When we left the interstate, we found ourselves on a long, quiet stretch of road that seemed almost deserted. The highway was barely lit, with only the dim glow of distant horizons, and on both sides lay vast expanses of farmland. The isolation of the scene added an eerie weight to the night. Not long after we exited the busy highway, roughly a mile down the road, I noticed something that made me slow down. Ahead, lying across the pavement, was an object that immediately set my nerves on edge. At first, I thought it might be debris or perhaps a discarded item, but as we got closer, the reality became impossible to ignore. It looked like a human figure, carefully concealed under a worn, heavy fabric. The figure was secured by strips of sturdy tape that encircled what seemed to be the neck, chest, and ankles, holding the body in a rigid position. The placement was unusual. It straddled the left driving lane and extended partly onto the grassy shoulder. I glanced over at my friend, my voice unsteady as I asked, "Did you see that too?" His quiet affirmation, just a simple yes, said it all. We both knew something was seriously off. The shock of the moment was compounded by the stark isolation of the location. Our minds raced with questions as we stared at the unsettling scene. In our shared silence, we decided that the only way to be sure was to drive past the spot again. The idea was to confirm what we had seen, to ensure it wasn't a trick of the light or our overactive imaginations. With hesitant determination, we turned our car around and retraced our path along the lonely road. The return journey felt surreal. Every second on that unlit road increased the tension in the air. When we reached the location once more, the figure was exactly as we had first seen it, wrapped under a heavy cloth and bound tightly with tape, resting half on the roadway and half on the grassy verge. The sight overwhelmed us, and I could feel the raw emotion welling up inside. Tears almost came as the reality of what lay before us sank in. I knew we needed to contact someone who could handle the situation, so I found a safe spot by pulling onto a nearby, quiet residential street. My hands trembled as I dialed the emergency services number. I explained everything as clearly as I could, describing the location, the isolated road, and the distressing scene we had just encountered. The operator remained calm and assured me that an officer would be dispatched promptly. They told us that there was no need to stay at the scene, which was a small comfort in an otherwise unsettling situation. Even though we were reassured over the phone, both of us were still deeply affected by what we had seen. Being 17 and 19 at the time, the experience felt all the more overwhelming because we were so young and unprepared for such a grim reality. Once the call ended, my friend and I quickly decided that it was best to leave the area. I drove him safely to his home, and then I continued on to mine, my mind heavy with questions and an enduring sense of unease. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the memory of that night. I spent countless hours searching for any news or official reports that might explain what we had seen, but no information surfaced. There were no articles, no public records, nothing that could provide an explanation. The mystery only deepened with each passing day, leaving me with more questions than answers. I often think back to that dark, quiet road in Florida, the soft hum of our car engine contrasting with the overwhelming silence of the isolated farmland. That night changed the way I view the world around me. Even during routine drives on deserted roads, I am reminded of the disturbing figure that we encountered and the lingering uncertainty of what truly happened. Though I have not uncovered any definitive explanation for what we found, the experience remains a vivid and haunting memory. It has become a part of my story, a secret moment that I rarely share, yet one that has profoundly influenced my perspective on the unexpected mysteries hidden in everyday life. The quiet, desolate road and the unsettling image of that bound figure continue to haunt my thoughts. I am left wondering if perhaps we stumbled upon something that was meant to remain concealed, or if it was simply an isolated, inexplicable event. Even now, the memory of that night leaves me with a persistent sense of curiosity mixed with trepidation, as I reflect on the fragile boundary between the familiar and the unknown. I was messing around on Google Maps, just zooming in and out of random places near my house, when I found something weird. There was a location marked Test 1. That alone was strange, but what really caught my attention was the number of photos attached to it, around 50 of them. I clicked through, expecting maybe street views or pictures of a business, but instead, I saw something that made my stomach twist. 2 people, both smiling, but something was off. Their expressions were unnatural, almost too wide, too forced. The kind of smiles that didn't reach the eyes. Every single photo was of them, always grinning, standing in different parts of a house. The backgrounds changed. The living room, a kitchen, a staircase. But the expressions never did. They just stood there, looking directly at the camera. I scrolled quickly, feeling uneasy, until one of the final images made my breath catch in my throat. The house in the photos. I recognized it. As a door-to-door salesman, I'd been through almost every neighborhood in my area. This house was familiar. I had knocked on its door plenty of times before, but no one had ever answered. It always looked abandoned. Windows dark, the yard overgrown with weeds, an old rusted car in the driveway that never moved. I had never thought much of it, assuming it was just another forgotten property. But now, after seeing those photos, I had a bad feeling. Something told me to go check it out. I didn't really know what I was expecting to find, but the curiosity wouldn't let go. I drove over in the afternoon. The house looked the same as always, silent, still, like a place frozen in time. I stepped onto the porch and knocked, waited, nothing. I knocked again, harder this time, still no answer. I hesitated, glancing around the empty street. A part of me wanted to walk away, but I'd already come this far. I knocked one more time, this time letting my knuckles rap against the wood longer than before. Silence. Then I pressed my ear against the door, listening. Faintly, through the thick wood, I thought I heard something shift inside. A soft sound, like fabric brushing against the floor. "Hello?" I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. Nothing. I stepped back, debating what to do next. Then, almost without thinking, I leaned forward and peered through the small glass pane at the side of the door. The glass was dirty, streaked with dust and grime, but I could still make out the inside of the house. At first, it just looked empty. Dim light filtered through half-closed curtains, casting strange shadows on the walls. The living room was cluttered with old furniture, a layer of dust coating everything. It looked abandoned, just like I'd always assumed. But then I saw him, a man, lying on the floor. He was completely naked, curled up in a twisted, unnatural position. His arms were bent at strange angles, his legs tucked beneath him like a puppet dropped mid-movement. He wasn't moving, not even a twitch. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't know if he was asleep, unconscious, or something worse. Every instinct in me screamed to leave, to turn around and pretend I had never come here. I backed away from the window, my pulse hammering in my ears. I didn't wait to see if he would get up. I didn't knock again. I just turned and walked, almost ran, back to my car. I sat behind the wheel for a few moments, gripping it tightly, trying to make sense of what I had just seen. But I couldn't. Nothing about this made sense. The house had always seemed empty, but someone was inside. And the photos, those disturbing grinning faces, flashed in my mind again. Maybe I should have left it alone. But the longer I sat there, the more I felt the urge to understand what was happening. I started scrolling through the photos again, my thumb trembling over the screen. I looked closer at the details this time, the furniture in the backgrounds, the lighting, the angles. And then I noticed something that made my skin crawl. In every photo, the two smiling people were in the same positions with the same expressions. The only things that changed were the backgrounds. It was as if they were statues being placed in different rooms. Or worse, mannequins. A chill ran through me. My stomach clenched as I thought about the man on the floor. What if he had been posed too? What if... A noise snapped me out of my thoughts. A soft creak. I looked up just in time to see movement at the window I had peeked through earlier. The curtain twitched. Someone was watching me. I didn't think. I threw my car into reverse, my tires screeching as I sped away from the house. My heart slammed against my ribs, my hands shaking on the wheel. I don't know what's going on in that house, and I don't think I want to. Growing up, I was incredibly close to my cousins. Even though we weren't related by blood, our bond felt as strong as family. I visited them often, and those visits were filled with adventures and secrets shared between siblings of the heart. My cousins used to live with their grandparents, and even now, one of them still does. Their grandparents' home was a grand old house in a quiet cul-de-sac in Chandler, Arizona. It was a 2-story home with 3 bedrooms, a spacious living room, and an imposing staircase that dominated the center of the house. The staircase was large and elegant, with a polished banister and steps that creaked just enough to send shivers down your spine if you weren't careful. I remember that house vividly, not just for its size, but for the sense of mystery that seemed to hang in the air. There was an unmistakable aura of something timeless about the place, as if the house itself held memories of generations long past. It was in that house that one of the most unforgettable experiences of my childhood took place. I was around 5 years old at the time, and my cousin, who was about 6, was my constant playmate. That particular day, the adults were gathered in the living room, chatting quietly while we were left to our own devices downstairs. We had spent the afternoon racing our Hot Wheels cars along the long hallway and making grand plans for our imaginary adventures. The bottom of the staircase served as our favorite playground, a space that was both safe and exciting for our little games. As the day slowly melted into the evening, the warm glow of the setting sun filtered through the windows, casting long shadows that danced along the walls. The atmosphere was calm and comforting, and for a while I felt completely at ease in that familiar space. But then, as twilight deepened into an eerie dusk, something unexpected happened that would forever be etched in my memory. I was momentarily distracted, looking up at the top of the staircase, when my eyes caught a movement that I couldn't explain. There, at the very top of the stairs, stood a tall figure dressed in a costume that looked disturbingly like a frog, or perhaps a lizard. The costume was oversized, and the creature's eyes were completely blacked out, hiding whatever expression might have been there. Its mouth was agape in a way that was both unnatural and terrifying. A silent, gaping void where a smile or frown might have been. The figure was standing directly in front of an open door, behind which the light was inexplicably off, deepening the sense of foreboding. At that tender age, my imagination was fertile ground for fear. The sight of this mysterious lizard man sent a jolt of terror through my small body. I froze, rooted to the spot, unable to move or even utter a single word. My eyes widened in disbelief, and tears began streaming down my face as the fear consumed me. I remember feeling utterly helpless, trapped in a moment that seemed to stretch on forever. It wasn't long before my cousin, noticing my silent terror and the tears in my eyes, also looked up toward the top of the stairs. In that instant, his face contorted into the same expression of horror that I felt, and we both began to cry uncontrollably. The sound of our sobbing filled the space, mingling with the creaks of the old house, and it felt as though the very walls were echoing our fear. In our shared panic, my cousin grabbed my hand, and without a word, we bolted towards the living room. Our only thought was to alert the adults. We had to tell them about what we had seen. We burst into the living room, our voices shaking as we tried to explain that we had seen the lizard man. The adults exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of amusement and disbelief. They seemed to dismiss our claims as nothing more than a child's overactive imagination, or perhaps an innocent misunderstanding of shadows and costumes. One of the older boys, who was like a big brother to us, rolled his eyes and said, "Come on, let's go check it out so you guys can be quiet." His tone was more exasperated than comforting, and although he clearly didn't believe our wild story, he agreed to take us upstairs to see what had frightened us so terribly. With our hearts still pounding, we followed him up the long, creaking staircase. Each step felt like a descent deeper into a realm of unknown terrors. When we reached the top, we headed straight for the door where we had seen the creature. To our astonishment, the door was now closed, and hanging from the doorknob was a small, worn teddy bear. It was as if the mysterious figure had vanished into thin air, leaving behind only a strange token of its presence. Our big brother asked in a measured tone, "Where did you see it?" I pointed tremblingly at the now closed door, hoping that he would understand the depth of our fear. He took the bear and set it aside, then opened the door and switched on the light inside. For a long, agonizing moment we all waited, our eyes scanning every dark corner of the room. But there was nothing, only the ordinary contents of a quiet, unused space. He shrugged, muttering, "Nothing's there," and led us back downstairs. Despite his reassurance, the memory of that surreal moment haunted me for years. I could never quite shake the feeling that what we had seen was more than just a trick of the light or a child's imagination. Even now, when I think back on that day, I remember the inexplicable chill that ran down my spine and the lingering sense of unease that seemed to cling to me long after we left that room. My cousin and I have often wondered what truly happened that day. Over the years, we've shared our story with friends and family, curious if anyone else had encountered something similar. While many have dismissed it as an overactive childhood imagination, for us, the memory remains vivid and unsettling. I've never mustered the courage to go upstairs alone since that incident. Every time I approach a staircase, I feel a momentary flutter of anxiety, a brief recall of that terrifying glimpse of the lizard-like figure. It's strange how an experience from so long ago can leave a lasting imprint on your mind. A quiet reminder that sometimes, even in the most familiar places, the unknown can slip in and stir up old fears. Though the adults that day might have brushed it off as nothing more than a fleeting illusion, the impact on my young mind was profound. It instilled in me a cautious curiosity about the world, a sense that there might be more hidden in the shadows than meets the eye. And while I continue to visit my cousins and relish those cherished family moments, there remains a part of me that wonders about the mysterious lizard man and the secrets of that old house in Chandler. I never believed that my mind could turn against me until that fateful summer. It started with small, almost unnoticeable details, a soft whisper in the dead of night, a fleeting shadow in the corner of my eye. At first, I told myself it was nothing more than tired imagination, but soon the signs grew too clear to ignore. Every night I lay awake, heart pounding, convinced that unseen eyes were fixed on me. I would wake in a cold sweat, feeling the presence of something lurking in the silence of my small house. The sound of my own footsteps in the empty hallways would suddenly echo as if another was following, mimicking my every move. My rational mind struggled to explain these moments, yet a creeping dread began to take root. One evening, as dusk faded into darkness, I heard a hesitant knock at my door. I froze, my breath caught in my throat, and slowly made my way to the entrance. Opening the door a crack, I was met with nothing but the empty, moonlit street. But in that instant I felt an undeniable chill, as though an unseen force had brushed past me. A subtle reminder that I was not as alone as I wished to be. In the following days, the experiences multiplied. I noticed that objects in my home, books, photos, even my favorite mug, had inexplicably shifted positions. I scribbled down every incident in a small notebook, hoping to catch a pattern or a clue. Yet, the more I wrote, the heavier my heart became, as if each word on the page was sealing me deeper into a secret I could no longer escape. The real turning point came one stormy night. I was jolted awake by a series of low, guttural sounds that seemed to come from the basement. Driven by a mix of fear and curiosity, I crept down the creaking stairs, my hand trembling on the cold, damp wall. In the far corner of the basement stood an old door I'd never dared to open, a door that now pulsed with an inexplicable pull. With a deep breath, I forced it open. Inside, I found a room shrouded in darkness, filled with relics of my past. Dusty boxes of faded photographs, forgotten trinkets, and a pervasive sense of sorrow. It was as if the room held a mirror to my soul, reflecting my deepest fears and regrets. The air was thick with memories I had long tried to bury, and I felt that all the strange events were merely a desperate cry from within, an echo of pain I could no longer deny. I left that room in terror, my mind racing with questions. Were the whispers real, or was my mind playing cruel tricks on me? The slow, unyielding buildup of dread taught me that sometimes our own thoughts can be our worst enemy. I still live in that house, haunted every night by the echoes of my past, and the constant reminder that some truths hide in the shadows, waiting for the moment when we dare to look too deeply.